Morena, everybody. My name is Corinne Barrett. I am the Master of Ceremonies for this amazing session that we have today. We welcome to Kōrero for Change, a webinar series that Access Matters Aotearoa Trust brings to you with funding from J.R. Mackenzie Trust and support from Whaikaha, Ministry of Disabled People. So the theme of today's webinar is on digital and information systems. We invite thought leaders, academia, experts, and disabled people to have courageous conversations about ableism and what is the role of digital and information systems in the process of inclusion and belonging of people with disabilities. I myself have disabilities. I'm a quad amputee, so here's my cool hands. This is a very important subject. But before we dive into our discussions, we have a few housekeeping reminders. So after each panel, the audience can participate using the Q&A to submit questions. So that's at the bottom of your screen. And if, for accessibility reasons, you need to speak or sign to ask your question, use the raise your hand option at the bottom of the screen. Our team will allow you to use audio and video to pose your question. We have two options for captioning. One is available on the webinar screen, and you can access this by clicking on the captions at the bottom of your screen. The second option is using a live transcript link. This has now been placed in the chat. This webinar will be recorded and made public on Access Matters website. By remaining in the webinar, you consent to being recorded. So I would like to invite Dan Walker, if he is available, from our Deciders panel to welcome us in with a karakia.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
Kia ora, Corinne. Tēnā koutou katoa e aku rangatira. Kia ora, everyone. Good morning. Good morning from Sydney. It's 7 a.m. over here. It's a beautiful day. And it's my honour to join you all today. Tēnā koe te rangatira karaitiana. Tim, kia koutou katoa e aku rangatira. We're going to start with a karakia to open us today. And this karakia talks about connection, connection to our loved ones who have passed on, connection to the land that we're on, connection to the world around us, the mountains, the rivers, connection to our wairua, our spirits, and then connection to each other on this call. There's also a part in this karakia that sends out a message of love to any of your loved ones who are going through hardship at this time, because it is hard out there at the moment for many of our whānau. So just recognising that and the many benefits that we do live with today. So with that, this karakia comes from Taranaki, South Taranaki, Hawara. It's called Puri Te Mai. Kei nui tātou. Puri Te Mai te tau te rangi kia tīna, kia wena, kia tokta manawa ora. Tēnā tokta manawa ki wea, tēnā tokta manawa ki rangi nui e tūne ke papatūno ki takoto nei. Ki tēnā o tātou te wānau me wanaunga me ngā piringa karanga maa. Āptea te ki ta unga māwiwi ki tukuna ki tami ana te pauritanga. Koe ara I runga ka riki ki runga tūturu waka maua kia tīna. Tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā tātou. Kia ora. Back to you, Corinne.
Kia ora, Dan. Thank you so much. Okay, so into the first speaker, I would like to welcome Dr. Sally Britnell, who is Senior Lecturer and Senior Research Fellow at Auckland University of Technology. So, welcome, Sally.
Good morning, Corinne. How are you?
I'm good.
Cool. Well, I've been asked to talk to you today about defining ableism. My background is as a lecturer, as Corin said, but I also am deaf-blind, and I have a lot to do in the health informatics sector. So I'm on the board of Health Informatics New Zealand. So ableism isn't a term that often gets put with digital out in the world, and it's something that we should be more cognizant of. So it's the concept that technology is built for everybody and it is said to work for everybody, but it doesn't work for a lot of people who are disabled. And I've been asked also to give you some examples of that. So I'll give you a couple of examples from my life. I have worked in multiple places in the health system and also at a university, and the systems there were, I would say, exclusive for me. And the most recent one is one that you use for student interactions and student tracking and things like that. It is in a single window on a remote server that doesn't enlarge or doesn't work with any other sort of technology that I would use as assistive technology. And so that way I'm almost completely locked out of it. We tried several options. So for example, we've tried turning on narrator on the server. We've tried turning on Zoom on the server and things like that. And over the last 10 years, I've been trying to get that fixed or that usable. But there's always things brought up like money is we're going to have to redevelop the whole program, so money is a problem, and that's kind of a big issue. So I'm a little bit of a stirrer. So what I do is put in a job every year saying this doesn't work, and if people close that job, I'll ring them up and say, why did you close it? And the most latest answer to that was it's only affecting one person and it's not affecting students. So in that way, our society can actually be quite exclusive. Another thing that people don't think about that I've come across in a couple of places that I've taught now actually is that if I'm teaching with a microphone system, there's usually a hearing loop for all of the students. But if I want to use a hearing loop or I need to use something like that, it's only there for the students and not the staff. It's as if in design that they don't expect to have a staff member with any hearing deficit. So that's a couple of examples from my real life. There is a couple of things that I would like to say that I have seen that are good as well. I was recently in the UK and I needed to travel 4 hours and go through the London Underground. And as somebody who's blind, that is quite daunting. But their online system you can book a person that'll meet you at every train carriage, every place that you go, and call ahead and get someone to meet you at the next station and walk you to the next one. And the way that this was implemented was one of respect and dignity and inclusiveness, whereas a lot of the systems you find in other places are exclusive. And what I wanted to get across with this comment is that it's not only the digital systems that need to change, but it's society in general. And that's a lot of the reason that I support Access Matters and do things with them, because it's society and societal views that actually influence the policies and the funding that influence what we have. So that's pretty much my introduction. I hope that's 5 minutes, guys. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I would love to go into more depth about all of this, but 5 minutes is up.
Wonderful. You know, you actually had 1 minute to go, so you're doing very
Oh,
well.
wow.
We're well on time.
Well, I could keep going, but I'll leave it for the questions.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you so much for that. You're definitely highlighting, just how far we still have to go.
We
It's
do.
just,
And
yeah, uh,
Braille on all medications in Europe is another thing.
absolutely. And, just because it affects one person, I reckon if they looked out there into the workforce more, it'll be a lot more than one. That's
That's
for
a
sure.
good point. Actually, my sighted colleagues also have trouble with the same thing, but they don't complain or they don't speak up either.
Exactly. So, Yeah. Okay, well, our next speaker is Neil Jarvis, who is a senior digital accessibility consultant at Intopia. So welcome, Neil.
Thank you very much. Kia ora, Corin, and everyone else here today. Sally has given us some really nailed-on examples of ableism when it comes to disabled people trying to access digital technology, IT systems, whatever they happen to be. And they're all too common, and it's not right. It would be reasonable, I think, for us to say, when we hear what Sally had to say there, surely someone's thought about this, and surely someone's got some ideas as to how this sort of thing can be prevented. And if you listened to people around us in government, in all stripes of government, and in the private sector, they will often tell you, well, we don't know what to do. We have no idea what to do. So we need something to help us. We like, something like a standard. Wouldn't it be good if we had a standard? Well, there is a standard. In fact, there are lots of standards which complement each other. But one really good standard I'd like to talk about today is the one that's very well used in Europe, in the European Union. And it's a standard that is so good and so useful, it underpins the European Accessibility Act, which much of which is coming into force later this year in June. And so good is this standard and so easy to read and easy to understand, but also very comprehensive, that it was deemed to be worth copying lock, stock and barrel by the Australians, our cousins across the Tasman. They thought it was good enough to actually turn it into an Australian standard in its own right. And so much were they impressed that even the Canadians also did the same thing as well. So in Canada, they have the same standard, the same wording, it's identical. Which does beg the question, why is Aotearoa New Zealand not doing the same thing? So what is this standard I'm talking about? In Europe, it's known as, it's got the gloriously exciting name of EN 301549. Only the European Union could come up with something as exciting as that. They that when the Australians imported the standard and made it one of their own, they added the AS prefix in order to designate it as also an Australian standard, but it's still known as AS-EN 301549. But it's a standard which tells us, advises us, guides us as to how we can make systems accessible. So, what does the standard include? Well, it's based partly and largely, in fact, on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which some of you will have heard of. But it's also more than that, because it goes beyond software. It goes beyond IT platforms or internet platforms, and it encompasses hardware. So things like ticketing machines, kiosks, mobile phones, any number of hardware you can think of. It also encompasses just general software. So, non-web-based software is there. So document formats, so PDFs or non-PDFs and all that kind of thing. So is user support. It's all very well having great systems, but if users don't know about them or don't know how to ask about them, they are still, partly at least, inaccessible. And the standard deals with that too. It also deals with, in detail, a wide range of disabilities. And it goes on to explain how each of the different requirements of the standard can be put to best use for people with specific disabilities. It gives actual examples of how to do that, whilst not also being prescriptive. So I'm again conscious of my time running out, but I would just say it's a standard which is very, very easy to understand. Yes, of course, it's technical to some degree because we're dealing with technical issues, but anybody who works in technology does not have an excuse for not knowing what the standard says. They can go and read it at any time, and they can, even if it isn't adopted in their country, they can at least use it as a guide for themselves. But I would say in Aotearoa New Zealand, we have said for a long time that we need accessibility legislation. And in order to get that, we are always told we need standards. Well, there's a standard right there. Use a tool, pick it up, let it do its job, and then let's move on to actually having legislation. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Neil. That's fantastic, and we are definitely looking forward to starting the implementation of robust and mandatory standards here in Aotearoa. So I'm just looking. As Paula is our next guest, but she may not be here yet. Just is Paula online?
Juliana here, Zoom Master. I'm not seeing her here, so let's start with the panel.
I am here, Corin.
Oh, you're here. So, Paula, which email have you logged in?
My EA Emma logged in, so here we go. Join as a panelist. Okay, have you got me now?
Yes, we have you now. Then spotlight you.
I'll put my video on. Sorry, team.
Gotta love technology. That's what we're here for. Okay. Well, please join me to welcome the next speaker, which is the lovely Paula Tesoro. I always get your surname wrong, I'm sorry. Who's the Chief Executive of Whaikaha Ministry of Disabled People. So we'll leave it over to you, Paula, and you'll speak about the role of digital and information systems in the inclusion of belonging in people with disabilities.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Ko Paula Tesoro tōku ingoa, ko te tumu whakarai hau I te manatu Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My sign name is this, which represents two bicycle pedals moving in a forward direction. I'm holding my fists and moving them like you ride a bike. And I am sitting with a blurred background. I've got a headset on, a white shirt and short, I used to say brown hair, but I think it's increasingly getting a bit blonde. So thank you for having me. Thanks, Corin, and thanks to Sally and Neil for your wonderful intros earlier. I want to acknowledge Access Matters Aotearoa for organising these Kōrero for Change webinars, and thank you, Corin, for hosting. Lovely to see you again. As you said, Corin, these are really helping us have those courageous conversations about accessibility and inclusion, and that's why Whaikaha is really proud and happy to support these conversations through a funding contribution. So our role at Whaikaha is to work with the disability community and others who play an important role in creating accessibility for our community to drive real and meaningful change with disabled people, tangata Whaikaha Māori and their whānau. So as we all know, we're living in a rapidly changing digital world, and as all technologies weave their way into our lives, it's really important that everyone has equitable opportunity to participate in society using digital technologies. That is digital inclusion. And for disabled people, the lack of inclusive digital systems often leads to exclusion, creating isolating environments. And, you know, Sally, you touched on how that experience is or has been for you in your teaching career. Unlocking that exclusion could really unleash the huge potential for disabled people to thrive. Disabled people across many research papers have been identified as the group at most risk of digital exclusion. And that's why it's really, really important that we move to get this right. In terms of the government approach, this needs to be something that every single government agency is actively working on. And one of our roles at Whaikaha is not just to think about central government, but also local government, employers and business, the community, and of course, central government. We've got a really long way to go in New Zealand on the journey to digital inclusion. And thanks, Neil, for the pointer to, I think it was AS 305149, that I will certainly be going and taking a closer look at. So I thought I'd just, in the interest of time, mention just a few things happening for context for discussion later that the panel might be able to pick up on. And so first is the Digital Service Design Standard, which is design thinking for anyone who designs or provides government services. And one of those overarching principles is around being inclusive and providing ethical and equitable services. Secondly, I want to touch on the Accessibility Charter, which was formed before the creation of Whaikaha, but it is in need of updating, and we're looking to be involved in that. For those who don't know about that charter, it was a commitment made by public service chief executives to deliver on Article 9, which is accessibility, of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the charter was initially developed by the Ministry of Social Development and disabled people's organisations. And it's intended to ensure that all information services for the public is accessible to everyone. And one of the really exciting new roles that we have at Whaikaha is to establish an integrated all of government information service for disabled people. And that comes with a real opportunity to make it easy for disabled people to interact with government. So very early days there, but I am looking forward to establishing that service. Thirdly, as you know, I'm sure many of you will know that New Zealand government websites must comply with the New Zealand government web accessibility and usability standards. And updated web standards are coming out this year, including the name to digital accessibility standards to include all digital content and services. So I know that, one of the opportunities, moving forward is really to focus on ensuring those standards are met. It's one thing which you sort of briefly touched on, I think, Neil, is, you can have standards, but actually you've got to make sure that they're enforced. The next area is alternate formats. So one of the other new mandates for Whaikaha is to be responsible for the all of government process for alternate formats, which has been transferred from MSD to Whaikaha. And we are really looking at the work to strengthen and grow the service. So again, very early days, we've had that responsibility just since December last year, and we're doing some work now to document all the processes and really work with disabled people on, well, actually, how do we make this easier for government to just have alternate formats as a default option, and make sure that disabled people can access digital information and all information. So in terms of our work program, we're just in the final stages of confirming it, but key is the expectation from our minister that we have an accessibility work program. And given the world we live in, that will need to include digital accessibility. The government's been emphasising, you probably will have heard, about the importance of making it easy for people to interact with the government. And our minister has made it really clear that interacting with the government needs to be much easier for disabled people. So, you know, that's both a real challenge, right? Because we know how far we have to go, but it's also a really wonderful opportunity, I think. The New Zealand Sign Language Board, who Whaikaha supports, is also considering options for enhancing the quality and quantity of the interpreter workforce, including trilingual interpreters as part of the New Zealand Sign Language Strategy refresh. One of the things I wanted to touch on, because I'm sure it will come up in this discussion, is AI. So you may well have heard Minister Collins, who's the Digitising Government Minister. She recently released guidelines for the use of AI in the public service to explore AI systems that are safe, transparent, and responsible. The guidelines have a specific section on accessibility, which sets out how to enable the benefits of AI for disabled people and how to prevent harm. So I really encourage people to read that guidance. You can find it on the digital.govt.nz website. You know, we have a role at Whaikaha to help support the use of AI in the public service in a way that's accessible, inclusive, and safe for disabled people. And finally, the Ministry of Culture and Heritage are looking into legislation to ensure that captioning and audio description is provided on TV channels. So that includes looking at funding security as part of the media reform package, and our team will support the work on this. So one can never do justice to this issue really in 5 minutes, but just to finish, you know, everyone has a part to play in digital accessibility, whether you're sending an email, managing a website, creating a post on social media, or hosting a webinar like this. And digital inclusion isn't just a goal, it's our collective responsibility. So I thought I'd just leave you with this quote from an accessibility consultant in the Digital Inclusion User Insights report from 2020, which I particularly liked. It says, "We need a culture of acceptance. We need everyone to embrace accessibility and to see it as important as online security. People need to understand that anything else is exclusion." Ngā mihi nui. Thanks, Corin. Thanks, team.
Absolutely agree with everything that you've said. I think it's just so highly important, and we really appreciate the insights you've shared, Paula. If you're able to stay on for our Q&A with the Deciders panel that's coming up next, that would be amazing. We'd love to have you there. So yeah, it is now time for panel 1, which is the Deciders. So moderating this kōrero is Mike Lloyd. Mike is a digital accessibility specialist at the Ministry of Social Development, and Mike will introduce the panelists.
Morning, everybody. In the Deciders panel for this morning, we have Catherine Barcham, Web Standards Consultant in the Digital Service of the Department of Internal Affairs, Victoria McLennan, CEO for IT Professionals New Zealand, Dan Tiwhenua Walker, who's co-lead for Microsoft New Zealand Indigenous. Okay, so you each now have 5 minutes to your initial statement, addressing the question, what is the role of digital and information systems in the process of inclusion and belonging of people with disabilities? So we'll start with Catherine, then Victoria, then Dan. So, morning, Catherine. Go for your life.
Thanks, Mike. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Catherine Barcham. I'm a Web Standards Consultant at the Department of Internal Affairs, DIA. As Paula pointed out earlier, digital is weaving its way into our lives. And she also pointed out that disabled people are more vulnerable for being left out in this arena. Digital and information systems are potentially transformational for promoting inclusion of disabled people. Done well, they can provide access to information and services on an equitable basis across society. Digital inclusion has several aspects, including not only access to digital technology, but also the accessibility of digital information and services themselves. There's not much point in providing digital people access to digital technologies if the content and services they want or need are not designed to work for them in the way that they need it. Inaccessible digital information and services promotes feelings of exclusion and isolation for people with disabilities and access needs, which is the opposite of what we want. The Government Chief Digital Officer has several projects underway to address digital inclusion. One of them, for example, is zero.gov.nz, which focuses on providing people with limited mobile data the ability to access government websites and other key websites for free. The team I work on that reports to the Government Chief Digital Officer is responsible for setting the technical accessibility standards for digital content and services. Right now, we have the New Zealand Government Web Accessibility Standard and Usability Standard, but we're focusing on the accessibility one today that Paula commented on and Neil commented on. This applies solely to websites or anything including software that we can access through a web browser. The Web Accessibility Standard is going to be updated in the next month to point to the latest version of WCAG, so WCAG 2.2. In the meantime, my team is also working, is underway on a digital accessibility standard, which both Neil and Paula mentioned. The digital accessibility standard will take what we have now in the Web Accessibility Standard and apply it to all digital content and services, including, but not exclusive to, mobile apps and software. This is necessary to extend digital accessibility focus further than the realm of web and into an increasingly varied array of digital areas in our daily lives. When digital content and services are built to be accessible, they can be used by people with disabilities and access needs whenever and however they choose, with the devices and assistive technologies they rely on to interact with that content and those services. Thank you.
Thank you. And Victoria.
Kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan toka wingoa, but please call me Vic. Thank you all for having me here today. I hope you can hear me okay and see me okay. I have a background for my Zoom for IT professionals, which is one of the many hats that I wear, and I'll talk about those in a second. But what an amazing event to be part of. It's clear that we're at a really pivotal moment for digital accessibility in Aotearoa. My fabulous panel colleagues are talking to you about the importance of accessibility and the role digital and information systems play in creating inclusion and belonging for people with disabilities of all kinds. I thought I'd shift the focus slightly to how we collectively drive change, how we influence decision makers, equip them with the tools they need, and ultimately embed accessibility into the DNA of our digital systems. As I said, I have a portfolio of roles, and one of them is chair of the Standards Approvals Board. So this is a very timely 5 minutes that I get to speak to you. Neil Jarvis just spoke on standards earlier and specifically referenced a European standard, EN 301549. And there have been questions in the Q&A about how we can adopt standards here in Aotearoa. So I'll just address you momentarily as chair of the Standards Approval Board. I'm really happy to investigate where EN 301549 and the other 3 ISO standards that are applicable in this space are in the agenda of standards adoption. We would probably adopt the Australian standard, which is normal practice here in Aotearoa, so it would become an NZS standard. But I wanted to warn you, and I think Neil did cover this, that adopting the standard is just the first part of the journey. Catherine's also spoken about how the government's adopting standards into their own mahi through the web accessibility framework and how they're expanding on that basis. So acknowledging that standards are one of the levers that we've got is really important. But how do we move from understanding these principles and having the standards in place into a more of a framework where people are creating a digital future that works for everyone? This is where leadership and education becomes really crucial. Decision makers need to understand how accessibility benefits not only the individuals with access needs in their direct community, but their entire organisation and their wider communities. The big question I'm grappling with is how do we educate these decision makers, provide them with practical guidance and empower them to make accessibility a core part of their digital strategy, not as a box to tick, but as a non-negotiable thing that they deliver. Industry bodies like IT professionals, which I'm the CEO of, advocacy groups like DECA, the Digital Equity Coalition Aotearoa, which I'm a co-chair of, so those are the 3 hats that I wear, and other communities like this one can all play a role in shaping this change. The industry has a really specific responsibility for leading by example, and this is where some of the harder work on influencing and educating the need for change needs to be done. We can all start by creating more awareness and targeted education, and this forum is a fantastic place to kind of launch from for senior leaders and decision makers, showing them how accessibility is not just an obligation, but an opportunity for innovation for them and their companies to make a real difference. So my 5 minutes must be up, but I'll close by saying, if we get this right, if we have the chance to build a more connected, empowered Aotearoa, one where every digital system works for every New Zealander, as a cohort here on this call, we can start with a shared commitment to that action of how we influence leaders to embody this and change. There were a few questions in the Q&A about standards. So if anyone does want to get involved in the standards space and New Zealand adopting international standards, of which, as I said, there are quite a few that are applicable, or want to talk to me wearing any of my other hats, IT professionals or DECA, the Digital Equity Coalition, you can email me, victoria@digitalequity.nz, and I will try and assist. So ngā mihi nui, and thank you for your time, and I really look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Vic. That's awesome. Just a reminder for everybody, if you've got questions for these guys after Dan's next piece, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom meeting. Morning, Dan. Go for your life.
Morning, Mike. Kia ora, and thank you, Catherine and Victoria, for such insightful and meaningful kōrero. Ko Aotearoa te waka, ko Taranaki te maunga ko ngā tiroa nui tōku iwi. So I come from Taranaki, and my iwi is Ngāti Ruanui. My mum moved down to Christchurch with the Māori trade training scheme and met my dad, who is Scottish and Irish, and I grew up down there. I have learning difficulties, or differences, and those led to me dropping out of school at a young age and really struggling with the whole school system, as well as my Māoritanga, being disconnected from my who I was. And I just want to recognize that accessibility in terms of my journey, while it may be hidden, I certainly struggled with some of those aspects. I wanted to talk about some personal experiences for me, in terms of my brother James. I mentioned in my bio, he was born with schizencephaly, a hole in the brain, which has meant that he's been a full paraplegic his whole life. And my stepdad John has done amazing work caring for him, and just seeing how technology has been an enabler for John to live a life where he can care for James in better ways has been, for me, it's a lifeline, I think, to see how John can interact with the outer world using technology. He can use apps now to check in on James when James is at school, or he has his own time. But more so, James is now 20, he's 26. John still has to, well, he was up until recently lifting him up and carrying him to his seats, and if he needed to go toilet, lifting him up. All of this stuff was doing a lot of damage to his back and his legs, his knees. And now there's some amazing tools out there from using technology to be able to help in that area as well. I also wanted to acknowledge those people who have gone through cancer. My son Joshi went through bone cancer at age 9 and lost his shoulder in that whole journey. And just seeing him navigate life in terms of the things that he can do. I remember when he was getting better, he really wanted to get back on his bike, and he just couldn't, because he couldn't reach his arm out, which broke my heart. And but now we see he's got a scooter, an electric scooter, so now he gets to school on a scooter, and it's given him his life back, because he loved his bike. Now he's got these electric scooters, which are amazing. He doesn't have to lift his shoulder. So I look at what the role of business, and I heard Victoria talk about it, industry, business. I work for Microsoft. Microsoft have a range of initiatives such as AI for accessibility. They have an accessibility ERG, internal rōpū, who do things like the adaptive controllers for gaming. They have inclusive design practices built into their software, like Word or Outlook. They have a range of different options to help with dyslexia or help with Erland syndrome. My brother's got Erland syndrome as well. So, all of these things that Microsoft do, but they have a role. They have a role to lead in that space, and at no time should accessibility as a right, and no time should accessibility be reduced to DEI. It is a must that these organizations must do. And my hope is that with all of the narrative that happens, not just in the States, in the US, but also in New Zealand, we should always ensure that this is something that business should hold the line on. We shouldn't be bullied or pushed to reduce these kind of things, because it is a must. And then last thing I'll talk about is, when I think of some of those collective responsibilities of iwi, my mum has quit work and is now a full-time carer for my granddad, my kōrero, who's got dementia, and he's now 7 years she's been doing that. And how, as a community, as a Māori whānau, we said, yep, we're going to do that. And I guess there's a lot of that I see with Māori, where they will quit their work and take the hit, so that the community and the government doesn't need to pay for them to do that, but that's just what we do. How do we recognize that sort of a lot of Māori will do that, and they will just do it without any kind of focus around financial gain? That collective community manaakitanga approach, it's something that I think, when we think of the government, yes, it's got to play its role, but to manaaki someone, is to take care of someone, is something that we must do. And just bringing those values back is, I think, really crucial when we think about accessibility. Technology obviously plays a part, but human values is something that we need to weave into that space too. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thanks, Dan. That's awesome. It goes, like you say, it goes into that whole idea of, like, as much as whether we've got laws or not to make things, to ensure that things are digitally accessible, it's still a collective responsibility to make sure that we can do as good as we can to make sure that, as many systems are accessible as possible. So as from a decider's point of view, of the idea of collective responsibility, how do we get that word out there? How do we get people who, if their arm isn't going to be twisted to make everything digitally accessible to us, how do we persuade or convince people that it's necessary and that everyone's going to need accessibility at some point in their lives? Kirsten, you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah,
only a little question.
Well, I can only really speak from a personal perspective as someone who's been doing this work for a long time now, rather than the job that I do as a web standards consultant. The most success that I've seen in educating people about accessibility, but moreover, getting enthusiasm and motivation to actually include that in their work and their day-to-day lives, and pass that onto other people and build up really an internal culture, is to the way that I've done it is really on a personal basis, not necessarily on a one-to-one basis, but like Dan mentioned his stories. Those stories are very, very powerful for reaching out beyond the block of accessibility is hard, and I don't know anybody who has a disability. Making people aware that disabilities come in more shapes and sizes than they realize, and bringing a personal connection helps, is the way that I've basically managed to get people to start caring. Once they start caring, that fever usually builds and they spread it out to other people in their spheres.
Thanks, Kirsten. Vic?
Yeah, it's almost a carrot or stick kind of a conversation. So I talked about educating and influencing. But in reality, when we look back to serious changes that we've had to adopt and embrace, let's think about health and safety, for example. There was legislation in place for a long time, but it wasn't until directors became personally liable for breaches of Health and Safety Act that companies really took it seriously and change was effected. So I think we need a little bit of both. Adopting a standard will take us so far, but having that standard cited in regulation will take us that much further again. And having directors of companies responsible for accessibility will take us even further again. So I think there's a bit of carrot and stick that we need to think about. Even though those are really challenging system changes that we're talking about here.
Cool.
Yeah, I often think about this in terms of like our willingness to engage with others, like truly connecting, and going past the sort of the front, because no one would know a lot of these things about me unless we truly connected. I've shared things that I don't normally share with 99% of the people that I meet. But I know that if I talk with people about this, I'll find some others with these same experiences. And I look at the changes that have happened at Microsoft, and our global CEO Satya Nadella, his son was born with the cord wrapped around his neck, and therefore ended up with all of these challenges, and confined to a wheelchair, couldn't eat by himself, couldn't all of these things. And I think that helped someone like Satya becoming a CEO, said, right, I'm going to make these changes within Microsoft because I'm experiencing this myself. And as people like us move into these leadership roles, we can also start making the changes in the places that we work. So, as I'm moving up in these places, I'm going to make sure that this happens too. There's, we have a responsibility to the people who we love and the communities that we love to ensure that we change these in the platforms that we work in. And I truly believe that if I'm at Microsoft or anywhere else, I would be doing this work. I would be trying to drive this change in whatever way I can, whether it's within business, whether it's within my iwi, whether it's, I'm now the chair of Child Cancer Foundation because of what Joshi went through, and damn right, I'm going to make those changes there for the whānau who have experienced similar things that Joshi's
Nice.
experience of this connection. How can we do that? And so, I think we bring all these different, saying my internet's unstable. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yep.
But yeah, I'll just end up with that.
Thanks, Dan. Another question with the whole idea of digital accessibility being more broader, if you like, known about, how do we ensure the quality of the assessment of, or if you like, the way that websites and digital information is just distributed to make sure that it does abide to these accessibility guidelines and standards? I mean, it's very easy for a lot of people to sort of think, oh, AI will fix it, or slap an overlay on it, that'll fix it. How do we keep the discipline and making sure that everything is actually going to work for us in the way that we need it to? Kirsten?
Well, that's an excellent question. Wow. I guess, what we've been talking about, this education and awareness, raising that makes people think about experiences over and above themselves, which kind of raises their general awareness about accessibility and the need to build accessible products. However, I've also experienced teams taking that passion and knowledge and incorporating it into the questions that they ask when they're building products or services, but also when they consider testing and I would really like to see more testing with product service testing with people with disabilities, or sorry, with disabled people. I think that's kind of one of the key ways to keep it not keep it real, keep it honest, but also to, and I probably shouldn't say this, but to go beyond the standard, because the standard is really a baseline. You know, making something compliant with the web content accessibility guidelines is just the start. Accessibility goes much, much further than that. And so I'd really like to see the assessments being, I mean, yes, there's a place for auditing against WCAG, but I'd like to see them put more of a focus on you know, real people's experience. Yeah.
Sure. And any comments from you, Vic?
I totally echo everything Catherine said. At the moment, testing is the obvious gate that can be applied. But Mike, you mentioned AI, and I think there's something really important here about training the large language models, the AI engines,
Sure.
so that they also understand that accessibility is a right and very real, and understand the lived experiences that Catherine's talking about. So I think we shouldn't let go of AI in part of this discussion.
Indeed.
Yeah, I
Sorry to
echo that.
interrupt.
Sorry.
Sorry. Just to let you know, Paula's in the panel too, if you had any direct questions for her. I do have one to ask, but I'll wait till after Dan's finished.
No, you go, Paula. I'd love to hear your kōrero.
One of the questions that I had for Paula was from Sally, and I'll just go back up here. And she was just saying, how is inclusion measured?
Thanks, Sally. Thanks, Corin, and Dan, thanks for letting me go, and to you for sharing your personal and heartfelt journey and stories with us, and Vic and Catherine for sharing your really obvious huge depth of knowledge in this area that from a technical level I can't pretend to compete with. So I love these webinars where, you know, you get to participate but you get to learn so much, which is why I've been really happy to be part of this. So back to the question that has come from Sally. Gosh, look, I think I'm going to be interested in others' perspectives on that too. I think, you know, part of it is always a subjective test, right? Actually, how do you feel about your state of inclusion? And sometimes those things are measured in, you know, in different surveys. And, you know, if I think about things like the general social survey, which now includes questions to mark, you know, the distinction between disabled and non-disabled people in terms of sort of social outcomes, and some of those things kind of point to actually are people included. I think, you know, I am aware that there are benchmarking methodologies for digital inclusion, and, you know, I think there's a you know, potentially an opportunity there. I don't know how much of that we do in New Zealand in terms of that you know, benchmarking against, you know, critical things like access to devices, access to broadband internet, the affordability of digital access, what the usage is, you know, between disabled and non-disabled people. So, you know, I think there'll be the sort of formal measures, and I'm sure there'll be people on this webinar who are, you know, much more equipped with knowledge about that than I am. But I also think there is that sort of subjective test too around inclusion. You know, how do people feel about their their day-to-day access to things. I was just going to touch, Mike, if it was okay, on the first question you asked, which is sort of how to influence. And this is something I spend much of my day and night thinking about in terms of my role, which is, influencing and sort of leading change across government. And so actually, influencing others is a really important part of the role. And when I think about inclusion, it's really critical that we talk about inclusion and the right to include and the importance of accessibility. One of the things I wonder about if we need to do more of, and I know some of the Access Matters earlier work sort of touched on this, is actually how do we talk with the business community about really unleashing the potential of disabled people, both as consumers of products and services, and as employees. And I read an interesting sort of stat a couple of days ago that there are 1.85 billion disabled people in the world, and the untapped economic potential annually is $13 trillion. And you sort of look at figures like that and think, in terms of where New Zealand is currently trying to, the government sort of has a big focus on economic growth. And I wonder how we have this digital inclusion and digital focus and AI focus for disabled people kind of on that agenda. So it's a wondering, really, to build on the narrative.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Well, I'm sorry, we could go talk about this stuff for hours, but unfortunately we've come to the end of our little window of time. But thank you all for participating in our panel this morning, and we'll pass it back to you.
Okay. Wow, absolutely fantastic. What a panel. And Mike's so right. We could just sit here for another couple of hours and continue talking about all of these things, but we do have to move on. So we are now going to move into our second panel, which are the thinkers. And I have the pleasure of introducing the panelist and moderating this kōrero. And the thinkers will each have 5 minutes for their initial statement. We have 4 panelists that I'd like to introduce. So we have Dr. Sam Medanian, Digital Health, e-Health Transformation District Health Solution Architect for Auckland University of Technology. We have Dr. Kōrero Tauuru, AI, Data and Emerging Tech Governance, IP and Critical Indigenous Researcher. Megan Seeds, Director of Digital Experience at Hennepin County, Minnesota, and 2024 Ian Axford Fellow in Public Policy. Welcome. And Annette Mills is the Professor on Information Systems, Department of Accounting and Information Systems at the University of Canterbury. Welcome. What a fantastic panel I have today. So yeah, you each now have 5 minutes to the initial statement addressing the question. Do you need me to read the question again? Or you're all okay with that? Everyone's on silent, so we'll just okay. Well, we'll first start with Dr. Sam, and then we'll move on to Dr. Kōrero, then Annette and Megan. So Sam, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for invitation. My name is Sam Madanian. I'm an associate professor at AUT, Department of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. Well, I think it's a very timely sort of topic regarding the requirements or why we need to consider this one from the very early stages. From my perspective, or from what I'm doing in, for example, designing information system, designing softwares, designing mobile apps, and so. And especially because the previous panel also talked about AI, the role of larger language model, we see that it's a increasingly connected world. So accessibility is not a feature anymore. It's a fundamental right, because especially when we talk about all sorts of governments, services, systems, and so on, that they want to move from some sort of traditional to more digital and information system. This is where we really need to talking about the accessibility for everyone, because these systems are the gateway of citizens of our community to education, to employment, healthcare, or let's say full participation in the society. So that's why right now or recently we don't consider providing all these systems and making it available as features. It should be there. Then the next thing is probably because my main field of expertise is digital health. And this is what I can talk more about, how having an inclusive approach, considering people with different requirements and different needs is quite important, especially in healthcare. When we talk about the people's fundamental right, we talk about their loved one health and well-being, and we talk about the quality of life in people. So with referring to the healthcare and the agenda of government in moving toward more digital services to promote health equity, this is where considering these features and making sure that the system that we design, the system that we put in place is accessible for all communities with different sorts of requirements and demands. With regards to some technologies, some of the technologies like your smartphone, your smartwatch, they already have some embed features to consider people with different requirements, but it's not efficient. Some of them should be improved, or some of them should be customized for us to be used in New Zealand. The next thing is about the artificial intelligence. Everything that we hear about AI, its fairness, providing equity, and so on. It is something that when we design such system, we need to consider different user groups with different requirements and demands. If we do have all these consideration early in the planning stage, before we jump into designing the system, it's very easy to come up with system to take care of the majority of people's requirements and demand. But if you design the system and in the implementation stage or after implementation, you think about, oh, we forget about to consider this particular user group with this specific need into place, then we have a little bit of problem here, because the whole system, especially with governmental system, is very big, is something on a national level, and changing it might be very time consuming, costly, and maybe sometimes impossible. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for having me.
Thank you very much. I just forgot to mention too, the panelists from panel 1, if you could just check in the Q&A section and possibly respond to some of the questions that we just didn't get a chance to ask, that would be amazing. Okay, moving on to Kiratiana.
Kia ora and good morning, everybody. Firstly, thank you for the invitation. It's been a really enjoyable morning so far. Inspired by Dan's personal introduction, I kind of feel obliged to do the same now. So I am a father of a disabled child. So so I just want to kind of give that personal touch to my talk. So my professional background, I've spent 30 years promoting the inclusion of Māori with tech. So I feel very strongly that we're having this conversation now. So I believe it's an absolute must that we need to ensure that all tech systems are inclusive of everybody. And I was quite surprised to read some statistics that our disabled people's communities make up about 24% of the New Zealand population. So that's more than the Māori population. So that made me start thinking about, some of the things I've done in my career collectively with other people to ensure that Māori are included in tech. So I think we're at a good stage right now with the introduction of AI, and we're not regulated in New Zealand. Standards are still new. It was only last week that some guidance was published by the Chief Digital Officer. So I think it's important for our communities now to try and get a voice and be part of that. I think some of the important aspects we can use, apart from being such a large part of the New Zealand community, is, as Paula spoke about before, the economic benefits. We need to push that. We need to ensure that our community is being heard and visible. So when I first started out, Māori had no voice. We couldn't even write our own language on a computer. We couldn't use macrons, we couldn't use spell checkers, but now we have all of that technology. And that only happened because we were proactive. Many people with different skills were proactive with the open source community, lobbying the big tech companies to have a voice heard, and by attending conferences. So as someone, I'm often invited to conferences, and I never hear a disabled voice at any conferences I go to. One conference last year, I had an advocate from the disabled community ask me, what can we do? And so it made me think that, yes, as a minority in New Zealand, Māori as a minority community, we need to be working with all minority communities and work together to ensure that there's a voice there. I mean, we know that companies do listen, but it's not something that's at the forefront of their minds if we're not present. So I think that it's important that we lobby more, we work together more, and we can push things like the Human Rights Act, New Zealand Human Rights Act, the Bill of Rights Act, the United Nations declarations. These are all instruments that companies, if they're made aware of, and there's a face or a voice being told to these companies, it will help. It'll help us to ensure that we're being included in these tech systems. I also think that So I think just overall, I think that the disabled communities have lacked a voice in tech, and I think this is our perfect time to be heard, to be seen by collaborating and strategizing how to go forward with that. There was some very quick ideas, and I'm not sure how much time I used up, but thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move on to Annette.
There we go. Okay, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, everyone. My name is Annette Mills. I'm from the University of Canterbury. My area of interest, I'm an academic, and my area of interest is on the use of digital technology and its impacts on people and society. I also have a very strong interest in data privacy. So thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this really important conversation. What we've gotten from the conversation so far, digital technology information systems has a very crucial role, I believe, in promoting inclusion and belonging for everyone, for disabled people, and everyone. But despite the advances, a lot of the tools that we have still have a lot of barriers that make them very difficult to use. So to ensure equity in our society and to address these barriers, we know we need better technology, we need technology innovation, we need stronger policies, we've heard that, and we also need consideration of ethical issues, cultural values underpinned by a commitment to making a world, Aotearoa, a place that is accessible for everyone. But there are a number of things to consider, and I'll address a few points here that came to mind. Some of the barriers, even with the new technology, disabled people face a lot of challenges. We've heard about poor design. A lot of websites and apps don't work well with screen readers. They don't have captions for videos, and they don't offer other ways to navigate. We have accessibility guidelines, but as our colleague Neil noted earlier, not everyone follows them. Assistive technologies, they're great, but they can be expensive, and a lot of people don't have the training or support that they need to use these tools. AI systems, we hear about biases, and sometimes they may unintentionally exclude or misrepresent people who have a disability, making it harder for them to get jobs, maybe access services, and so on. And then, of course, another barrier we've heard about is ableism, which can hinder the adoption of inclusive practices and sometimes make accessibility seem like something that's optional rather than a fundamental requirement. There are a lot of technologies that are coming out that support inclusion, AI-powered tools, speech-to-text apps, adaptive technology, voice control, eye tracking, assistive devices, and I think platforms like virtual reality and augmented reality will hold a lot of promise for people to be able to learn, work, and connect. Even with these, there are still challenges. Thinking of the areas that I'm very interested in, privacy concerns. Some of the assistive technologies collect a lot of personal data, which raises concerns around security, data privacy, and things like real consent. In fact, some of them means that people with that disabled people sometimes need to disclose sensitive information, much more information than people who are abled, and we need to sort of deal with that inequity. Digital tools need to be able to support and enhance accessibility, so it should never be something that's going to replace essential human services and personal interactions. And there's sometimes a danger of relying too much on technology. And then, of course, I've said before, it can be expensive or difficult to access. And in that case, it will increase the digital divide and create even more barriers than sometimes issues that are being resolved. So how do we address these? We can talk about policies. We've got some of the policies that were mentioned earlier around revised standards, making sure technology is inclusive and accessible from the start, not trying to fix it later on. Governments, organizations helping to make assistive technologies, internet access, etc., more affordable. And then AI, we're often concerned about that. So trying to design AI systems in ways that avoid discrimination and works for everyone. Thinking of my hat as an academic, I can think of educational institutions for us to begin to provide alternative text formats, captioned videos, screen reader friendly platforms. And then, of course, recognizing when it comes to intersectionality of disability, Māori identity, digital solutions need to be co-designed with the different communities in mind. So, so those are some of my thoughts in the area. Driving change is going to require collaborative efforts. It means government bodies, technology companies, advocacy groups, educational institutions. We all need to work together, raise awareness, whether it's through education or training. Thinking about my role, I focus on business information systems, and perhaps our curricula needs to integrate accessibility principles so that when we produce graduates, we produce, future developers, designers, decision makers who prioritize inclusivity in their designs. So, in conclusion, yes, digital technologies and information systems can help to break down accessibility issues and foster true inclusion and belonging, but only if accessibility is made a priority. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Annette. And now, Megan, welcome all the way from Minnesota.
Yes, thank you. Welcome. Thank you very much. Kia ora koutou. I am joining you from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the U.S., where you may be interested to know that it's about 15 degrees below 0 Celsius right now. So I hope you're enjoying your summer. As Corinne mentioned, I served as a Ian Axford Fellow in Public Policy in 2024, and I was embedded within the Ministry of Social Development during that time. And while my research focused on approaches to maintaining trust when exploring generative AI, concurrent to my work there, really enjoyed connecting with many of you on approaches to increasing accessibility in digital service delivery. So it was a great opportunity for me to explore a few different interests while I was down there with all of you in Aotearoa. And I really value being able to stay connected on this topic. I think access is very much a global value and something that we all, as has already been said, have a role to play in making possible. In my home organization, I direct the Digital Experience Department for Hennepin County, which is a local layer of government that doesn't really exist in New Zealand, but is very much where service delivery happens direct to residents in our country and in my state in particular. Hennepin County serves about 1.2 million residents, and we touch every part of government service, whether it's roadways, public safety, economic assistance, housing, healthcare, libraries, and we also collect property tax, of course, to fund it all. The mission of my organization is still today to serve residents through transformative services that reduce disparities, eliminate inequities, and create opportunity for all. And that has been important in my work within my organization to really advance and mature how we approach digital accessibility and ensuring the service that we do deliver is accessible. And in answer to the question, as others have said, I do believe that digital information systems can increase access to service, but that's only if accessibility is built in the first place. Otherwise, as has been said, we risk creating just additional barriers. Because my team focuses on digital experience and digital service delivery, we do believe that these online options should make service more usable and accessible to residents. And we think a lot, and I think a lot about the time tax that some of our in-person service delivery models can burden our residents with, if you consider the extra time or expense or transport or childcare that's needed just to connect with an in-person service. But again, that's only possible if the services we do deliver online are usable and in particular accessible by design. Just as in New Zealand, the US, anywhere from 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 people presently have a disability. But I think, for those of us lucky to live long enough, 100% of us over our lifetime certainly experience situational or temporary, if not permanent, disability. And in my role in local government serves everyone across all life stages, and we don't get to pick our market share. We serve everyone, and there's no alternative to going elsewhere for service. So really focusing on service for everyone has to be key. I focus a lot on both top-down and bottom-up approaches to maturing how we deliver accessible service. So with leadership, that's about building support and expectations across our leadership for that accessible service delivery. And then across our staff, we're looking at ways to invest in training and creating more resources and really helping create more capability for accessible development across our organization. That focus includes awareness is a really important step we found, and skill building, because we do see that everyone has a role to play in making that service accessible. Our decision makers need assistance to know how and when and why to prioritize that our service be accessible. They're making funding decisions. They have a role in advocating those expectations. Our program staff are a key role to help create those requirements and establish outcomes that have accessibility centered. And of course, our designers and developers, do, even as they come out of school, need more assistance in building up their skill in designing and developing with accessibility in mind. So all of us are here to learn and to advocate. But we have found some particular strategies that have been really helpful in what we've been delivering. One is our own accessibility policy that we've established to standardize the WCAG 2.1 is the target we're trying to hit in what we're delivering with digital service delivery. We've created internal kind of basic type training for staff, and we also contract for more advanced training. We have a really wonderful partner local to us who we have on retainer to do accessibility testing and accessibility reviews and consulting and coaching, and it's a company that's fully staffed by all employees with disabilities. So it both gives us really key access to that talent pool and models a more inclusive way to approach the work as well. And one of the last things I wanted to mention was that in the US, our Department of Justice has a new ruling on interpretation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That ruling has a deadline of April of 2026, where all state and local governments have to kind of meet the same accessibility standard that's already in our own policy. But it gives us like a deadline with teeth. Now, while I was in New Zealand, I spent a lot of time observing the differences between government structures. And because I work at the local layer, my time in the US is often frustrated by our many layers of government and our very litigious society. But I can say this DOJ ruling has been very helpful in establishing a new time deadline and kind of giving even more of our work more teeth. Now, it's also true that it's possible that ruling could be in jeopardy. We have not heard that the Department of Justice is pivoting away from that at this moment, though it would seem to be in keeping with the new federal administration that's in place in the US. But I'm pleased to have support still from my leadership and our executive board that our accessibility work continues and is still very much relevant to the mission-oriented work that we have at our organization. And so we'll continue folding accessibility into our values, delivering things like our design system that makes all of our standards and accessible components publicly available, prioritizing our user experience community of practice, and modeling what we can to center accessibility in our own project work that we lead. But again, I've learned so much from all of you in Aotearoa about approaches to this work and really appreciate being part of this conversation. Kia ora.
Megan, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. The two questions that I have well and truly been answered in all of your talks, but we do have some couple of questions from the audience that I'll put out to you. Firstly, we actually have one of the members who would like to have her video on, so that's Anne. So I will welcome Anne to ask her question through the interpreters for the panel.
Interpreter speaking, we can't see Anne. Corinne.
Oh, you can't see Anne's video?
Hold Anne, hold 1 second, please. I'll just pin her. Thank you, Anne. Sorry.
Okay.
Can you go back, please, again? Yeah. Sorry, Anne is just reintroducing herself. My name is Anne, and this is my sign name. Wirral is my last name. I am the chairperson for Deaf Action New Zealand. And, I'm also starting my own business soon. I really, really appreciate all the Kōrero that's happened in IT, because digital space, IT space is so vital. And we have, the most biggest issue is affordability. Digital technology in New Zealand is so unaffordable. And there are lots of deaf people in the community that have missed education, so they cannot actually read the content. It is so difficult to understand the content. So there's lots of things which become big barriers for us. I mentioned earlier, I am setting up my own business. There is no support there. For example, I have to start like getting subtitles, for example, it's so difficult that deaf people, some of our deaf community are bilingual and trilingual. They use NZSL and Kōrero, for example. Some have other disabilities as well. So it becomes very difficult to have interpreters on screen. We are lobbying to have captioning and interpreters so that we can process information in different ways, and then and only then can we get full access. Now, the funding becomes a big issue. Whaikaha puts information out, though we do have systems that we can support you. I would really encourage you to contact me if you wanted any support in the accessibility for deaf community. I'm more than happy to be part of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. That was wonderful. Okay, so just a couple of other quick questions. So one of the members attended a meeting regarding online bullying and is wondering what protection methods do we look at in the IT digital space? Obviously, there's ignorance, insecurities, and lack of respect can all result in the attacks on individuals, but through the advancing of accessibility online in the IT space, this would need to be looked at. So has anyone got any advice on the protection methods that we can look at? Annie?
Yes. So perhaps one of the first places to start is with NetSafe. There are some legislations in place as well within New Zealand, but probably having a look at their guidelines. Perhaps one of the areas, and to be honest, I haven't looked into this, but maybe one of the areas to have a close look at is what else needs to be in place to support disabled persons if what is there already is not adequate, because sometimes the provisions, they are of such that the threshold for action is very high, and people miss out. So this might be something I would say could be taken up with an organization like that. But I know from the legislative perspective, some of the thresholds are quite high. And the same thing happens with, for example, Privacy Act and so on, trying to take action, particularly if it's individuals who are involved. Sometimes the provisions are not as clear. But I'm quite happy if somebody would like to reach out and for us to have a bit more of a conversation, perhaps point them in a little bit of a direction in that area. Note, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just going based on the couple of things I've had particular interest in.
Perfect, thank you. And then we'll just do one more question. Can someone speak to the wider future climate concerns the use of AI exacerbates, which will affect disabled people on a bigger scale, i.e. displacement and heat?
Karatiana speaking. Yes, we do know that there's going to be significant risks to the environment. Our water, AI consumes a large amounts of water and emits a large amount of emissions into the air, as well as a lot of minerals from the earth. So I would suggest perhaps promoting the recyclable energy, clean energy, and there's also a number of our tech companies in New Zealand have signed up to net zero, an initiative to promote better use of the environment. But also saying this, I mean, it's not a topic that's being discussed very much with anybody. And I think, again, I think all of our communities should be being more verbal and talking about this a lot more. So, thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so there are some questions in the Q&A, and if directed, if any of you on the panel currently could look at those questions, and if you can answer them for people, that would be amazing. Because we are now, it's our break time, so we get 10 minutes to go make a cuppa, or depending on the time of day or evening. Megan may want to crank up the heating where you are. Sounds like it's a bit cold. So yes, we are going to go into a 10-minute break. So the recording will stop on the screen, and we will return again at 10:46. So maybe 10:45 if everyone can sort of come back on and be ready for the next session. That would be amazing. So yeah, enjoy your break, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Okay. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hello. Right, shall we get into it? How refreshing to have such brilliant minds coming together. The morning has flown by, and we've certainly had some intense and amazing conversations. But I think we're ready to get into the next session, which is our third panel. So the third panel is the creators, and moderating this panel is Raymond Dufton, who is on the screen here. Now, Raymond is a commercial property landlord and an entrepreneur, and he became a quadriplegic following a motorcar accident, but he can tell you a little bit more about that as he introduces himself and our next panelists. So welcome.
Right here, hi. It's certainly been a very busy morning. You've a lot of very interesting people and all sorts of different areas from all parts of the country and the world. Anyway, okay, yeah, no, I had a bit of a motorsport accident, and one of the times I wasn't driving my own race car, I was co-driving. But cut a long story short, yeah, I'm now a tetraplegic and can move my shoulders and my head. So yeah, I sort of come to the disability thing a lot newer than a lot of the other people that have been talking, or friends. So yeah, I've only been in the chair 5 years. But anyway, we've got some other people to introduce here, so we'll probably keep on ticking along with that. So for starters, we got Dr. Surinder Harrison. She's the CEO of Access Advisors. And what's the best way? The person want to give a wave so we know who's who. Is that one way of doing it? Very good. Rightio, there we got Tim Young is the founder and the CEO of Smart Access Systems. Rightio, great. And then we got Benny Extras, who is the QA engineer in the quality engineering department for the New Zealand Transport Agency. So, yeah, hello to all of you.
Kia ora.
Right, yeah. So each one of you, as you've probably picked up by watching up till now, that you've got 5 minutes each for your initial statements, and any the questions and things will follow, and really let us know what is your role in this digital information systems, in the progress for the inclusions and the belonging of people with disabilities. So we'll probably get underway with Dr. Srinda Harrison.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Chandra, but I think Tim was supposed to go first. I wasn't prepared to be the first one.
I don't
It's all
mind.
good. I'm all ready to go, unless you wanted to go first, Tim.
It's fine.
Okay, awesome. All right then. Kia ora, everyone. Ko Chandra toku ingoa. I am the CEO of Access Advisors, and we help organisations to improve their digital accessibility. So listening in and being part of this amazing kōrero has been really enlightening. It's lovely to see so many awesome humans getting involved and raising that awareness. I think to everybody's point, raising the awareness is one of the first things that we can do. And so I'm really thrilled to be here. So thank you for that. A little bit about my story. So I am ADHD, but I'm late diagnosed ADHD. So I struggled through a lot of my education and through life thinking that that it was me that was the problem. But then realized that actually there's nothing wrong with me. I just happen to be a little bit more than other people. Anyway, I've been working in the digital accessibility space for about 24 years. Not because I'm ADHD, but actually just because the combination of technology and humanity is where I play. I sort of started off working in the US and the UK, where digital accessibility was actually part of the process of creating websites and creating digital interfaces. There has been certainly some form of standards and guidance available right since 1999, when the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines were first introduced. Now, these guidelines were based on solid research and the voice of people with lived experience. So we're already, if we use those Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they haven't changed that much in the last 24 years. So if we're using those, we're already kind of building in that voice of lived experience. One of the big things for us is that a lot of clients come to us saying that they would like to improve their digital accessibility. And in general, it's because, it's for the right reasons. They understand that it is something that they should be doing. But quite often, they're not really aware of the impact that a lot of those different types of access needs have. And so a lot of what we do is actually raising that awareness for these businesses and helping them prioritize taking action. Often people just think, often in the tech world, we quite often focus in on people who are screen reader users. So that assistive technology is reasonably pervasive and a lot of people use it. And from a technology perspective, it's easy for us to address that need. But it's not just not just blind screen reader users that we need to be discussing and getting people aware of. Catherine Barcham earlier on sort of talked about how disability is coming in various different ways and in various different forms. And what I'd say is that I think we need to raise awareness, not necessarily about disability, I'm using my air quotations, but actually about access needs, because we will all have those access needs at some point, whether or not that's right now. Raymond, using technology and input devices may be more difficult now, but for all of us, we're aging and those needs will change. So it's really important that we can help people to understand what access needs are in a way that helps them understand it. Not everybody has met, a tetraplegic or somebody who has, who's an amputee. So we need to be really aware of that. Vic also mentioned about how important it is for us to create new systems that are accessible. And I totally agree with that. It's really important. Often we're asked to come in once somebody already has a product and monitor it or test it. What we'd much rather be doing is including accessibility and the thinking around inclusive design right from the beginning. So not thinking of it as a separate part of a design process, but that it is just, manakitanga. It's just basically taking care of everyone who is going to use the system. I think one of the last things that I want to talk about is that we talk about disability and how we should be designing systems for disabled people. And I know that during COVID, we had a very impactful instance. What happened was everybody shut down. Nobody could go to school, nobody could go to university. And within a few weeks, a lot of those tertiary environments were able to bring up technology and allow people to study online. This is amazing, right? This increases that accessibility, and that's really vital for digital accessibility. But what's really on the flip side of this is that disabled students had been asking for this for many, many years previously. And the problem that we have is that sometimes it takes a mainstream or a non-disabled awareness to get the solutions that we need. And I think it's really important for us to remember that awareness is about people who are disabled, but also those who are not yet disabled, or those who are temporarily disabled or situationally disabled. Not that I broke my arm a few years ago and I was on some pretty massive pain meds. And at that time, I had a physical disability and I had a cognitive disability. And I then needed to think about all of those systems and realized just how mainstream actions are so difficult. So for me, I mean, my whole ethos and what we do at Access Advisors is trying to help organizations include digital accessibility in their everyday thinking about designing products and systems and software. So I think it's really vital for inclusion, and I'm really privileged to be part of this kōrero. So thank you very much for including me.
Rightio, very good. Well done. Thanks very much, Lee. Rightio, we'll probably go straight into talking to Tim. Tim, the floor's all yours.
Kia ora koutou, ko Taranaki te Maunga, ko Maunganui te Awa, ko Young Me Chisholm Aku Hapu, e tipu ahau e kirikiri rawa, e Ngāroa Wahia, e noho ana ahau. So my family come from the Taranaki region. I grew up in Hamilton, and I now live in Ngāroa Wahia, home of the Kingitanga. I am the chief executive of my own business, Smart Access, and the non-profit My Life, My Voice, which some of you may be familiar with. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and how we're using it to include people, and how we're using it to kind of automate our data collection for my business, and about our trainings we're doing with My Life, My Voice. So at Smart Access, we have a navigation system for disabled pedestrians to plan a safe journey. So in there you can say where you want to go from, where you want to go to, what your disability is, and it will give you the best route based on your specific needs. It's also fully personalizable. So we give these presets, but anyone can go in and change these weightings for any environmental feature of how difficult they find it. And then that will customize the pedestrian route it suggests for you. So we use a bit of AI algorithms to help with that. It's been based on about almost 2 years worth of user testing throughout all of that. So we've been really careful with making sure that reality aligns with our suggested route. But yeah, if anyone uses it, always keen on feedback to improve that. We're using AI with the algorithms. We're also using it to automatically detect features from satellite images and photos through machine learning algorithms that kind of figure out what things look like with enough previous examples. So that's meaning that we can scale globally, and we'll be able to add this information all around New Zealand in the coming year and around the world as well, so that you only kind of need one app when you're going to new places. We're also adding a large language model, or these ChatGPT features, so that you can talk in a normal conversational tone about the navigation and kind of see what barriers are coming up around the corner, or if you're feeling a bit extra tired today, or it's raining, maybe you go a different route and talk to it like that. So that's going to be cool. And we've also added an AI vision feature, which you've probably seen through ChatGPT or Be My Eyes. And basically it just allows you, if you don't have good vision, you hold it up and it will explain to you different environmental features that are coming up. So that's really cool. And then so for My Life, My Voice, we're conducting AI training to upskill the wider disability community. We see this as quite a big opportunity to bridge a lot of inequality gaps if the disabled community can be fast adopters of this technology, while also being really aware of all the risks, of which there are many. So our education, we have 10 hours of AI lessons on a range of topics. We have like an introductory session where we talk about general risks and benefits of AI. Then we have an AI and accessibility, talking about all the different accessibility AI tools. We have a section on using it in the workplace or education, a section on using it for kind of personal productivity and like monitoring health and well-being, and then a section on smart homes as well. So I've found that hugely beneficial personally as a tetraplegic, being able to now control everything in my home. And so, you've probably heard of AI, I'm sure, but, unless you're watching it really, really closely, it can be hard to keep up with all of the extremely fast progress that's going on. So just 2 weeks ago, there was a really, really big step up that people may not have noticed with the release of the model from ChatGPT o3 Mini High and Deep Research. And both of those in combination are extremely powerful. The week after it came out, I developed a program myself. I've got minimal programming experience, and I developed a program myself that would have taken our programmer 6 weeks previously. Also did a cost benefit analysis of our AI training in about 3 hours. And it's really incredible. It's really, really incredible. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of disruption over the disability sector over the coming years. And we just think it's really important that people are prepared for this and keeping up to date with it. So, with the big thing this year is going to be AI agents. And so AI agents are kind of like, these things that will go and do a range of tasks for you automatically on your computer. So They have one now called Operator, ChatGPT does, where it will go onto a web browser and do a number of tasks for you. It's not super accurate yet and not super fast, but in the next few months it will be, definitely. And then this year they'll also release one that will be able to control your mouse and keyboard. And so that at that point, which is this year, it will be able to do the majority of administration tasks automatically. And so that's going to be hugely disruptive for every sector, but the disability sector as well. And so, while AI, it will be able to do a lot of administrative tasks, and while in the future it will probably be able to mimic human interaction as well, there's always going to be, I think, for a very long time, the disability sector, disabled people are going to want to continue to meet with humans. And so in the next kind of 2 years, as like artificial general intelligence becomes ubiquitous and it can kind of perform all administrative tasks, I think there's going to be a big shift for disability organizations to shift more from, community-facing work plus the 70 or 80% administrative work behind the scenes to being largely focused on the community-oriented work, and then the AI will take care of many of the organizational tasks. So that's going to free up a huge amount of work and free up a huge amount of time for our staff, and give them the ability to spend more time with the community, which is where the real value lies with human interaction. So yeah, we have a policy at My Life, My Voice that no one will lose their job to AI, and we just will continue focusing on making sure that we can give really good supports to people and not lose on that human interaction side while being able to reach many more disabled people. We also have a policy that when we can prove that we've had 20% gains in productivity with our staff adopting a couple more of these technologies, we'll move down to a 4-day work week. So that will probably happen in the coming months, which is really exciting. And we think it's really important that you pass on the productivity gains to your staff while clearing wait lists, and that way we're maximizing the benefits while minimizing the negative aspects. And almost certainly in the future, we're going to need a universal basic income where everyone gets a certain amount of money, and universal basic services as well, where everyone has access to a doctor, a superhuman doctor or whatever as well. So they're all really important things. And yeah, I just want to say, it is going to be extremely disruptive. I don't want to freak people out too much, but also it wouldn't be unwarranted if you are freaked out. And, it's really difficult, especially in our sector, because there's so many jobs, including my own and other disabled people's, that rely on other people being disabled. And so as the AI helps remove a lot of these disabilities from the world not being set up in certain ways, there will be less jobs. And it's just, it's a really challenging thing to go through, because like for myself, I want more independence as a tetraplegic, but that's going to mean that that's one less job for someone potentially. So it's something we all just need to be aware of and talking about regularly and moving through together. And like we need to have been doing this immediately. Like it's everything's moving so quickly. I just wanted to light the fire under people's feet a bit with moving forward with getting ready for these technologies. Yeah.
Oh, epic. You are a busy boy, to say the least. And having the vision to look ahead and where AI is going and everything, good luck to you. Well done. Thanks very much, Tim. That was epic. And we'll now move on to Benny.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Benny toka ingoa. I am a white New Zealander with invisible disabilities, and I understand that this offers me unearned benefits in society. I have short hair, glasses with coloured lenses for Irlen syndrome, and am wearing a loud, brightly patterned shirt along with noise cancelling headphones. I am late diagnosed autistic, so may take time processing or speaking words, and have fiddle fingers currently. I work at New Zealand Transport Agency Wakakotahi as a software tester. So my perspective is as both a creator and a doer. For the question, what is the role for digital and information systems in promoting inclusion and belonging for people with disabilities and access needs? I work within teams delivering both web applications and the NZTA mobile app, which was released last year on both Android and iOS platforms. I've also worked with Chandra. I learned that digital and information systems need to provide easy alternative access to products and services, bypassing challenges or barriers posed by physical locations like physical access, sensory sensitivities, noisy environments, poor wayfinding, or product information visibility, along with other things. Giving accessible choices helps us not only do what we want to do, but feel seen and in control of our lives. Systems need to enable everyone to perform life admin with as much independence as possible, especially tasks around things that we need to live, like home, food, clothing, medical, transport, and money. The NZTA app is encouraging here as it gives access to your license and vehicle details for management. Systems need to be built to include accessibility throughout the software development lifecycle. It is the responsibility of all roles to deliver an accessible solution, from the decision makers, researchers, designers, all the way to the doers. Employ experts, but also educate internally. Creation of accessible digital products and services can be a great targeted driver for people's introduction to accessibility and collaboration. Systems need to be tested with assistive technologies and real devices. Be transparent on what you've tested with in case of issues that apply to specific assistive technologies. Also, it's fine to use automation like evaluation tools to help with testing, but we need to make sure that manual exploration is also done, because automation tools will not cover everything that is needed. Challenge any add-on products or services that claim that they will make your products or services fully accessible. We need to adhere to international standards. There's been a lot of talk about that already today. Also understand, again, as Catherine earlier mentioned, the spirit of the requirements, not just with a focus on compliance. Looking to the future, working to WCAG 2.2, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.2, and consider advice from the European standards. Systems need to consider integrated products and services that they need to be accountable to the same standards for an accessible end-to-end solution. So if your product has used services or products from other organizations, it's also up to you to make sure that the full journey is accessible. We need to build to factor in that technology grows and changes quickly. So supporting native platforms and semantic code. This will provide more stable interfaces for people longer term and cost less to maintain. What I mean by native platforms is use the things that companies like Apple, Microsoft, Android have
built in to their software so that when they make improvements, your improvements, you pick up those improvements automatically. And semantic code just means using web code kind of core instead of deciding to make a custom thing when that thing is already an existing thing. It's a little bit hard to explain in a non-technical way. I think we need to make sure that systems are built by disabled people as thinkers, creators, doers, and deciders at every level of the organization. Include our perspective, but don't rely on us to carry the responsibility of delivering accessibility. This needs to be recognized as part of our work, training, education, culture, and processes. We want to include disabled people in user research, developing systems before and after they're released. Take on feedback and make changes to products and services and value lived experience. I'm at 5 minutes. I've got a couple more points, but I will stop. Thank you.
Right, yeah, very good. Okay, so now we sort of go into any general discussions, really, if anybody wants to bring up it, what's been discussed. But obviously, Shranda, you've been sitting there for a little while. Have you cut in here?
Raymond, thank you so much. One of the things, it has been a real pleasure working with Benny. It's finding people who care about digital accessibility to the level that Benny does with NZTA is actually, it's really awesome to work with people like that. I also think that Benny touched on the idea of including people with disabilities in research and testing and so on. And I know that somebody mentioned that in the Q&A earlier on. And I think it is vital. What we know from the work that we do is that when an organisation comes to us and says, we think we've got a bit of a problem and would kind of like to explore it, and we get people who have access needs to run through the tasks, record those interactions, what happens is that I would say 99 times out of 100, the people who watch those videos are completely gobsmacked. They have an aha moment that they've probably never had before. And I think it's really important to know that people who have lived experience of access needs can also be included in mainstream research. And then we're getting not only the usability, not only the accessibility insights, but also the usability insights as well. I think we are underestimating the opportunities of including disabled people in those kind of user research processes that we do as a matter of course for other software and websites and so on. So it's really important to think on that one.
Kia ora, Raymond, Juliana here from the back end. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you can see from there, but if you want, I can pose them.
Right, yeah. Okay, we'll keep moving. Someone's yakking in my background, which is not ideal. But anyway, Tim, you got anything you want to add off? We're sort of running not too bad behind schedule, but a little.
I've just got a question for Tim, if that's all right. That was
far away.
In the Q&A section. Someone's asked, what's your thinking around the data concerns, specifically the inequity around disabled people having to disclose more sensitive data that was raised in the previous panel?
Like when you're working with the privacy concerns when using with AI, you mean? And
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern to a point, but it is becoming much, much easier to run large language models locally on your own computer and not have to share data. So you can actually do them offline now, and it won't share any data with anyone, even if you get the DeepSeek Chinese model and you're worried about it sharing data with the CCP. You can actually just download it on your own computer now and use it there, or use a server if you want it to be faster. So if you're at an organization level, that's not too hard to get around, but for most individuals, they won't do that. So you definitely want to be careful with what you share. I mean, there's always a balance between convenience and data security, and it's a decision each of us need to make, but you need to make it with the information that, it could potentially, if leaked, that would be devastating. So we'd just know literally everything about you if you're using it for your, meal planner and everything. So yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, personally, I do go with convenience sometimes, and then other times I have, more strict security protocols depending on the application I'm using. So something to be aware of. But if you do want to be careful, reach out to us at My Life, My Voice, and we can help you set it up locally on your own server or computer.
Perfect. So what about human oversight and the need to take accountability over AI-made decisions, particularly in entrenched and embedded, since it is moving so fast?
Yeah, definitely. No, there always needs to be a human loop. We need to take responsibility as humans for the decisions that it makes and how it affects other people. It's always a first draft for us. We have use it as a first draft if we're typing up a proposal or a plan or whatever it is. But then that just saves so much time having that first draft, and then you need to go through and adapt all of it, make sure it's all in your own words and everything, but it still just saves so much time. And what was the second part to that question?
Just
was around the bias.
Accountability over
bias.
In the bias.
Yeah, no, the bias is definitely a problem as well, but at the same time, you can calibrate these models with prompts to reduce that bias quite significantly, I've found. So, even just pushing it towards preferring the social model instead of the medical model, it actually does a pretty good job after that. If you say focus more on the social model, it will tell you exactly why that's better than the medical model and how to apply that in a number of different situations. So, pretty much all of it can be worked around if you think a little bit about the problem before you do it. But for people who are inexperienced with that, it will definitely be a problem.
And also, lastly, can you just mention about the option for disabled people who have EIF or IF funding to use it to pay for AI training?
Yeah, we can't guarantee it. It's not our decision, but we have found more and more people are doing that, and it should be easy to justify with the dependence goals and anything you have. So it's ACC, individualized funding or EGL. We're getting more and more success with people doing that, and that will set a precedent for others too as well. And that's why we're doing the cost benefit analysis as well, because getting the government to buy you a robot vacuum cleaner will save you, thousands of dollars over a few year period, compared to needing someone to do that. So it really is beneficial for everyone.
Perfect. Okay. And then just one last question for Benny. Do you find accessibility gets left behind as teams race to finish projects? If yes, how do you get the buy-in from managers and senior technical staff to ensure accessibility is included right from the start?
Yes, is the answer to that question.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the colleagues in any form of software development will agree. It's been a lot easier working
within an agile workflow that understands that there's like design and then your team refinement that goes through to produce at the end. Because if you can get someone with an accessibility focus in at the start of that, you can talk to your managers and stakeholders about, that it saves money to do it up front than to retroactively try and fix all the problems, especially after you may already have that raised by people who have barriers, and that can be, you can raise that that's a damage to value of reputation for the business as well. If that happens, so to avoid those situations and make sure that everyone can access it from the start, there's also, as was mentioned in a previous talk, the buy-in of a disabled audience. If you exclude people, you are missing out on customers. So you can kind of angle it like that, but mostly trying to do anything is better than nothing, and to educate, spread out that knowledge around your teams, your businesses, everyone you talk to everyone, and you will find allies in other areas as well, like content creation, and the design team user experience. I hope that I have somewhat answered that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. No, another wonderful panel, and lots of insights and things to take away. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Raymond, for moderating that, and for all of the panelists. Right, we're going to jump into the next panel, which is our last one, and I will be moderating this one as well. So we're just going to welcome the thinkers, and we have three fantastic speakers on board with us. So we have Paul Scantleberry, Diversity Recruiting Leader, APJC for Amazon Web Services. Andrew Law is the Digital Accessibility Specialist at Ministry of Social Development. And Tamsin Ewing is Accessibility Content Specialist, Web Accessibility Initiative for the World Wide Web Consortium. So very cool. Welcome, everyone. Right, I'm just going to jump straight in. We are going to start with Tamsin. Let's go.
Sorry, I thought I was going last. That's lovely to be.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I don't mind. I'll go first. I'll go first. I'm happy to. Thank you, Corinne, and kia ora, everyone. I'm Tamsin from W3C, and it's great to be on the Doers panel. I believe we're on the Doers panel now, right?
Oh, yes, the Doers. Yes,
I'm on the Doers. I'm a doer.
Yes, you're on the Doers, definitely.
Yes. So I really appreciate this opportunity to contribute some thoughts in this Kōrero on the importance of digital accessibility in including disabled people in society, and how the role of content design can help to enhance this inclusion. I'd just like to quickly say that I'm not representing W3C today, and will just be speaking as myself and from my own experiences as a designer. So one of the themes that's very clear in today's discussions is that technology is a great equalizer for disabled people. Sally, Dan, and Tim gave some particularly insightful examples in their talks earlier, and so did Anne, who spoke about her experience as a deaf person in the panel 2 Q&A. With assistive technologies, and when content has been designed accessibly, people with disabilities can overcome enormous barriers in the physical world to participate in and contribute fully to society. My job is about doing my best to ensure what I design and build is usable by disabled people. It's also about helping people who develop digital products understand why something isn't accessible and how to make it more accessible. Until recently, I've worked mainly in New Zealand's public sector, and I learned a lot in those years about the importance of designing content that members of the public actually need to be able to access, as Megan mentioned earlier. Government services are not services they can get anywhere else. 6 months ago, I joined the global team at W3C. W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium, an international public interest non-profit organization that develops international web standards. It's the standard that the European standard, EN 301549, is based on, as Neil Jarvis mentioned earlier. In terms of my role, W3C recognizes that content design is one of the skills that's extremely important for creating accessible digital products, alongside development and UI visual design. And so W3C has built a team to ensure W3C does create highly accessible content. So I'm in the accessibility team, and that's otherwise known as WAY, Web Accessibility Initiative. This is the team that since 1997 has developed the standards and supporting resources specifically for making the web accessible. This work is a global collaboration with input from people around the world. My work at W3C involves helping to design W3C materials, including educational resources, which aim to make the standards more accessible and approachable to a broader audience. To understand the WCAG standard, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, it's always best to start with the materials that support it, as these provide the context you need on how to implement it. So for those of you who build digital products in the audience today and are interested in any supporting materials that can help to understand WCAG, I'll just mention a couple. Of course, here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have the Web Accessibility Guide developed by the Department of Internal Affairs, which breaks down all the knowledge areas and different content types to make it easier to understand what you need to do. And at W3C, if you Google W3C WAI resources, WAI resources, the link is coming up in the chat in a minute. There's a long, useful list with things like tips for getting started, tutorials, and how to test content. So as a doer, how does my role enhance accessibility and inclusion for disabled people? Well, aside from supporting the important work of W3C, content design has the goal of making it easy for people to find information quickly and complete tasks online easily. To be a really good content designer, it's essential to know about accessibility, because increasing your knowledge and skills in accessibility improves the quality and usability of your web content immeasurably. Content design is an exciting field to work in. It needs to be highly collaborative, taking in the views of different users, including disabled people. Technology keeps changing, so you never stop learning. And when you incorporate the knowledge and skills involved in making content accessible, when you share this knowledge and support others to grow in this space, including your leaders, and when you know that your own actions in the products you build are helping to make society more inclusive, it's very meaningful and rewarding work. Ngā mihi nui, kia ora.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tamsin. Next, we will go to Andrew.
Right, thanks, Karen. Yeah, so I thought I had a little talk. I'm sort of going to go around from the blindness sort of perspective, just because I have the lived experience with that and how digital information systems have actually made my life a little bit more inclusive. So I'm going to touch on a little theme, and it's pretty much worldwide. All cultures around the world sort of bond and socialize around food. So the first thing you would need to do would be to go shopping. So back before all the supermarkets had accessible websites and apps, you could go to the supermarket, or I would go to the supermarket, get an assistant to take me around. But I was really limited to having a list with me, knowing what I wanted, because you can't see what's around the store, so you got to go with that. Now, somebody walking around the supermarket with functional vision, they might see an end display with a new flavour of Tim Tam and think, oh, I want to try that. I never had that ability for many years now. Might be good for the wallet and the waistline, but I would still have liked to have tried that. And then, you know, when you're around friends and that, the topic might come up and you've actually tried it. So that's all good. But now with the apps, it's like I can actually browse all the categories. I can find things that I never even knew the supermarket's even stocked. I can add them to my shopping list. I can get it delivered, or I can organize a click and collect. But yeah, that's making the whole getting the food to you is very much more accessible now. But say you don't want to do shopping, you want to go out and socialize and have dinner out. There's a lot more now restaurants and that having an online presence, which is great, because if I'm looking at 3 restaurants and only one of them has an online presence and they've got the menu online, I'm going to choose that restaurant, because I prefer to have a look at the menu, read it with my assistive technology before I actually go out. Because yes, you can have somebody read the menu when you're sitting down for dinner, but you know, you possibly get people around you thinking, what's wrong with that person? You know, why can't they, why is this person reading the menu out to them? Also, when you've got a loved one reading the menu out to them, they tend to skip over things that they think you won't like. So it gives a little bit less, you know, freedom of choice there. Also, if you're out in maybe a new group, a lot of group of people that you don't really know that well, it can be a little bit embarrassing to ask somebody there to read the menu to you. So that freedom of being able to read a menu and make the choice before going out, I find is great. And then I will go to, what if I want to host a dinner party, if I want to cook? So I've gotten into a lot of the smart home stuff. So I have a wood-fired grill / smoker that I control with my phone. So I can monitor that and adjust the temperatures and cook on there. I have a food temperature probe, which I monitor on my phone or watch. And so I don't need to risk about poisoning all my guests with undercooked chicken. And then I also have an oven, which I can also control and monitor with my phone. The issue with all of these 3 things is that they were not designed to be used by disabled people. They were not designed with the disabled person in mind. So even though I can use all 3 of them, every single one of them has accessibility issues, and there are parts of it that I can't use. And that sort of comes down to I think one of our blockers when it comes to accessibility. I don't know if people have heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So it has 2 sides to it. And I think one of the big ones is it's just people's natural thought processes that there's nothing, you know, I'm not different. Everyone can do what I can do. So they create these apps and websites based around what they do. So if they can do it, everyone can. That's sort of that aspect. And generally that means using a mouse. So, you know, and that then affects more than just screen reader users. It affects voice control users and switch devices, keyboard users, anyone that can't use a mouse, that affects them as well. And then the other side of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people will often think that they know more than they actually do. So you'll get people out there, they have a degree in computer science. So when you try and tell them that they've done it wrong, they will get their back up. They will start pushing back and say, you know, and so I know what I'm doing. So that is also another sort of barrier that we have to fight. And it's just a matter of awareness is a big part of that too. So yeah, I think I don't know if I've done 5 minutes or 2.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, and Paul.
Thank you very much. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Paul Scantlebury toku ingoa, ko taku torangi mahi ki Amazon Corporate, ko te Head of Diversity Recruiting across APAC, so Asia Pacific. I am a white middle-aged man. I have short graying hair on top. I have a dark beard, which probably has a little bit more grey in it than I'd necessarily like to admit. And I'm currently in my home office at home here in Aotearoa. This is hard because I'm the last person up. And I mean, how
No
how
pressure.
can I possibly do justice to all the amazing things that have been said already? And I will try.
Yeah.
So I think from my perspective, so I am somebody who identifies as having disabilities. I both have dyslexia and a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a musculoskeletal condition. And whilst those two things are not connected to each other, they're both genetic, but they're not connected to each other. I never fail to see the amusement in the fact that my dyslexia means I still, even after many years, can't spell ankylosing spondylitis. So I do like to find the humor in that, because we have many moments in our journeys as people with disabilities which don't have the humor in them as much. Um, Now, to follow on from all of the incredible things that have been said by the amazing panelists so far, I think really what I hear and what I experience in both my personal life and in my day job is that there are some real kind of core functions of digital systems in kind of in the inclusion space. Some of it's about making information accessible to everybody, allowing everybody to have fair and equitable access to every different part of the world. Uh, it's also about enabling both independent living and work, and being able to create opportunities that fit in with both of those areas. It's about breaking down communication barriers. There's a lot of development that we have seen and advancement we have seen in our being able to connect with each other in the digital world. Some of which has been phenomenal and has changed the lives of our communities. But some of it hasn't been fully accessible and has closed some people out from some of those platforms and spaces. And it's about creating a perspective for individuals, for society, and for businesses around this not just being the right thing to do, but also being the smart thing to do. We have a significant community. We know that people with disabilities is the largest underrepresented group globally. And there's a lot of involvement, engagement. There is a lot of money. There is a lot of innovation that comes from this space and has a real history of doing so that we are not tapping into, both as individuals and as businesses and as society, if we don't think of accessibility as one of our first lenses when we start to build technologies. And as I noted, I work for Amazon, and our business is it's big, it's broad, it covers many different things and different elements. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that that we or anybody else has cracked this. In fact, I think we are early in the journey of creating completely accessible environments in the digital space. I am going to say that we have made, and I mean this as tech businesses, and that includes everything from the big companies like Amazon to the smaller companies who really drive some cool and innovative stuff in this space. We've seen changes, and there's been features that have been talked about, from voice control over different kind of elements of your life, everything from your home to how you order your shopping, which was just mentioned, through how we have access now to the breadth of information that's out there, from what used to be paper books that weren't accessible to everybody. We now have voice view screen readers that enable us to really get more information and access to learning, but we can continue to do better. And that drives down not just from those products, I guess, that I'm talking about at the moment, which are features on kind of the consumer market, which includes kind of Amazon's website and how we think about accessibility to all of those products that are on Amazon.com, but also inside and embedded into things like Amazon Web Services accessibility tools. So we have a huge cloud platform that is used by many people and continues to be used by more people here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as we are growing our footprint here. And there is both a need and a responsibility to think about how we support both the embedded fundamental systems to be more accessible, but also those partners that we work with and those third parties that touch into our platforms to also drive that accessibility need. So I guess we see all these real world impacts on independence, on access to entertainment, even just things like being able to watch a TV program through accessible methods has changed significantly, but there is so much more to be done. All the way through to creating jobs and giving people access to the right job opportunities that kind of drive this ongoing thought process of innovation. And I guess I'd probably close out that for me, digital systems aren't just about convenience. They're not just about creating equal opportunities. They are about driving a better outcome for everybody. We've talked about kind of key elements of the nothing about us without us. There are jobs, and there should be jobs out there for people with disabilities to do the mystery shopping or to do the embedded accessibility training to help businesses understand and get this better. And there are so many places that we could start, and I don't think we will ever finish on making technology accessible. We've talked about AI will continue to change the way that we view the world. And this is a job creating kind of accessibility in the digital space that will never finish. So we shouldn't view it that way. We should view it as a future, a current, a future, and an ongoing opportunity to make real change and see things that will impact the lives of many, many people. We've seen so many technologies that have been created from an accessibility standard in the first instance that then have benefited everybody in every walk of life. So I'd like to see that curb cut effect being really thought about by businesses and governments and institutions when we're considering how we approach this in the future. Hopefully I've done a little bit to summarize some of the incredible things that other people have said, and I'm going to take none of those points as purely my own.
No, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Paul, and thank you all. We don't have any. Oh, there may be a question now on the Q&A. That's oh no, it was just a thank you to you from one of the audience. Just they were recently diagnosed ADHD, autistic and ADHD. So the kōrero has really resonated with them. So that was just another question from the panel. What is your take on enforceable standards? If anyone would like to, Tamsin?
I can have a go at that. I mean, I have a view. It's personal again, right?
Yep,
I mean, I think it's the stick and carrot sort of problem that we always have. You know, I think we do need something that's enforceable. Like Megan talked a lot about what's going on in Hennepin County to underpin their strategy. A deadline date for making things accessible. But the problem is you need to still support people to learn how to do it. You can't just penalize people who don't have the training. So it's very much, for me anyway, I mean, I look at the problem from a very practical sense, working in organizations that are lacking in knowledge and skills. Where do you start? What do you do? And so for me, it's about getting your leaders on board, the decision makers, and getting them to walk the talk. Perhaps they don't have all the knowledge, but they can have advisors. And so that gets attention from the people that are listening, and then they start to work harder to make their products accessible. And you can help by making processes and workflows embed accessibility in those workflows and processes. You can update your style guides to include accessibility because half of it for content people isn't there. And you can embed it in your inductions and customize staff training, compare, depending on what people, what their role and their functions are in the team. So there's so much you can do to help upskill in order to meet those enforceable standards. But just to do an enforceable standard without the support is just, putting everybody in the shtuk. So it's difficult. It's a difficult problem. And that's why it's taken 20 years of saying it's mandated in New Zealand, but people still are not doing it, not because they don't want to, not because necessarily they don't care, but there's a gap between the support and also a little bit of more stick. We need more stick, but more support. That's my view.
I also think another place where we can start too is also in the training, start at the beginning. People are coming through the universities, the polytechs and stuff like that. If it was enforced that accessibility was a bigger part of those qualifications, even like around project planning, those qualifications. I mean, when I wanted to upskill mine, I rang around a few institutes, IT training places. One of them in particular, I said I was blind and, can I still, what support do you have? And they just basically said, no, I can't help you. And goodbye. And he was quite rude. And then the one I did go through, they adapted at the time. They'd never had a visually impaired or blind student before. So we had to develop all of the different processes and everything while I was studying. So, and I taught them how to do it, basically. So if it was anyone else that wasn't as clued up as me, they might have had a bit of trouble. But as it turns out, the big boss in Australia was actually watching my progress. He was interested. He watched me all the way through. Came up and shook my hand at the graduation because I ended up with the Ducks that year. So, he was like very impressed. So yeah, and just getting. But I still remember one thing. There's one little paper that they touched on accessibility, and it looked at accessible names and color contrast, and that was it. Out of my whole software development qualification.
And that's one qualification amongst thousands.
Yeah. So we need at the beginning. We need, so awareness totally really starts with the young ones. And
in schools even. Okay. Paul, did you have anything on that one? Or we've got someone in the audience who wants to ask something too.
Let's go to the audience question.
Are you sure?
Yeah, and I've got an opinion on most things, but I'll happily see.
Not perfect. So Anne is going to sign and the interpreter will go ahead.
Great. Hey, thank you, everyone. Look, awareness is number one. I totally totoku what you're saying there. I just think, just a little bit of background as a social worker working in management. Gosh, there's a raw scope of management, different directions we can take this. And I think you need to have the confidence to have those conversations and context to the work. You have to study Burgessness. And of course, you have to be prepared in that arena as well. I think, Paul, you mentioned before, you said that there's, it's true. We actually think I also have some concerns. It's a money issue. So often it's that fiscal kind of barrier that we have. And we can maybe advertise and try and find other ways to incorporate naturally some revenue. But I just think that, it's just, that is a very real issue, whether it's online is a cheaper option to run different forums and that kind of thing. So it very much depends. There's a variety of technology, as mentioned before, that's available that provides access. One thing that I think Enable have is different as business that can enable businesses are subtitles, as simple as subtitles. But we do need more and more added and some refinement in subtitles. For instance, incorporating Kōrero. And some deaf people actually can't read. Their literacy is not so good, and some can't write either. So we have to remember that it's not just a replacement of the interpreter. We probably need to have more conversations around what that looks like and be more inclusive in our audiences. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes, so I don't know if Paul, if you wanted to finish again with with a comment.
Well, and I think Anne's point is really really important that we operate right now. We are in socio-political and economic tough times. We can't avoid the fact that individuals don't have a lot of money in their pockets. So this technology should be cheap or free, and provide that access to everybody. And there's a responsibility from both corporates and government, I believe, to make that work. We also need to recognize that there are businesses who, and this is one of the things that I think is impeding some of the progress when we were talking about the carrot and the stick that Tamsin was particularly kind of talking to. Businesses are looking at where they can cut costs. They're looking at productivity. They're looking at the things that can help them increase margins at times when they're also having to stay afloat, which is super important for us, for our economy, for our societies. I think there is a different way of thinking about how to make this easy for people. And maybe that is, sometimes it is about giving more access to all of those resources that are sometimes out there, but we can't find. Businesses can't find that. Does a small business understand how to create the right kind of comply with the accessibility standards? And if a big business doesn't comply with those accessibility standards, what's the teeth? Are there teeth behind the policies? Is there a repercussion? Is there well, you're going to get fined, and that money's then going to go back into allowing for those smaller businesses to have a greater amount of access to those resources. So I think we've got a complex time where technology is advancing at a pace that we've never seen. And it's cool. And Tim, I could listen to you all day talking about the cool stuff that you and your business are doing, and that is just a ripple on the surface. But I think that there is work that groups like this, these Kōreros, and our collective collaboration can really do to help make sure we keep up to pace with the movement of the technology, and make sure that we are giving access to individuals, to businesses, and to governments as well, to make this really change. So thank you for letting me kind of finish off with a few words. I appreciate that.
No, that's absolutely true. And Benny just made a comment to Andrew's point, and also one of the Q&A comments, that this puts the pressure on disabled individuals to create the systems and processes and do whatever it is people are there to do in the first place. So it's really valuable to have included. So yeah, I think we will close off the panel there. I've been given strict instructions to have this end at 12 o'clock on the dot. So we will do that, and I will keep on time. So I would just like to give a bit of a closing statement that I've sort of typed up in between. But my biggest thank you starts to all of you, all of the panelists, all of the speakers, all of the moderators, everyone in the audience, everyone who has been here as part of this, because it really does start with us. And it's, the AI and the IT and digital systems can help break barriers and create true inclusion and belonging, especially for people with disabilities and other minority communities. But as someone myself with disabilities, I know firsthand what it feels like to navigate systems that were not designed with people like me in mind. I've experienced the frustration of inaccessible platforms, the unconscious bias in hiring processes, and the challenge of proving that capability isn't defined by physical ability. But I've also seen how technology, when used intentionally, can be a game changer. Creates opportunities, improves access, and allows people with disabilities to contribute and thrive in ways that were once unimaginable. So inclusion isn't just about recruitment, it's about belonging. It's about ensuring people don't just have a seat at the table, but are valued, heard, and empowered to succeed. AI and digital tools have the potential to drive this change, but only if they are built with diversity at their core. We need technology that works for everyone, not just those that fit the default mold. And if I had fingers, I would do little quotation marks, but you can understand where I'm coming from. But as we leave today's discussion, let's commit to pushing for real change. Let's move beyond compliance and toward innovation and that truly serves all communities. Because when we design for inclusion, we create a future where no one is left behind. So thank you for your time and your insights and your commitment to making this vision a reality. And a huge thank you to Access Matters Aotearoa for putting this together and for everything. Ngā mihi nui, and go be well. And thank you.